Thank you. I want to I want to follow Congressman Welch in thanking Bernie for his courageous vote against the Patriot Act, but I also want to follow Congressman Welch in really thanking you for making it possible for Bernie to vote against the Patriot Act and be reelected. It's really the people of Vermont that make that possible. I've long had an affinity for Vermont, partly because my wife's grandparents bought a house, a summer home here in Charlotte in the 1930s, and so she's been coming up here her entire life. Her sister lives in Charlotte year-round. I've been coming up for as long as I've known her. So I love Vermont, but I also love Vermont because early in my career I defended a number of people who burned flags and were prosecuted for that, and the cases went to the Supreme Court and established that you have a constitutional right to do what you want with the American flag. You can wave it or you can burn it. It's yours to express your views with. And in response to that, there was a nationwide campaign to amend the Constitution to excise flag burning from the protection of the First Amendment. And 49 states voted in favor of that amendment. One state didn't, so I thank you for that. I want to focus on just one. There's so much, as Bernie suggested, so much that the NSA has done behind our backs and without our knowledge, purportedly in our interests, that we could have an entire seminar. But I want to focus on one program here, and that's this the phone metadata program. The fact that every time every one of us in this room and across the country makes a call or sends a text, whether it is to your children, to your parents, to your spouse, to your doctor, to your psychiatrist, to your drug rehabilitation center, to your drug dealer, to your bookie, to your Alcoholics Anonymous buddy, they're keeping a record. You know, I go pick up my daughter at school and I drive up to the front of the school and I send her a text, "Where are you?" And she sends me a text back, "I'll be right out." And then 5 minutes later I say, "Where are you?" And she sends a text back and says, "I'll be right out." And then 5 minutes later I send another text, "Where are you?" And the NSA is keeping a record of every one of those communications and storing it in some massive building in Utah for 5 years on every one of us, without any basis for believing that my daughter and I are planning any terrorist activity in those exchanges. As some of you probably know, when this program was adopted in secret, it was approved by a court in secret, and the head of national intelligence, James Clapper, lied about it to the American people and to Congress when asked under oath by Senator Wyden, "Are you collecting data of any kind on millions of American people?" James Clapper said, "No." He later, when Edward Snowden revealed that in fact he was, he later explained that that was the least untruthful answer that he could give. I can think of at least two more truthful answers. One would be yes, that would be truthful. The other would be I can't confirm or deny, which is of course what they frequently answer when asked questions about programs that may or may not exist. But no, he lied to the American people to keep the program secret from us. So now some people say, well, why should we be concerned about it? If they're not capturing content, they're not listening to the conversations we have, they're just keeping a record of who we're calling, when we're calling them, how often we're calling them, and how long we talk. And if that helps them to identify a link between some terrorist out there who wants to kill innocent civilians and someone in America who might be plotting with him, isn't that ultimately in our interests? Well, I want to suggest a number of reasons why I think we should be concerned about this program. The first, I think, is we should be concerned about the secrecy. There is a role for secrecy in our society, but there's also a role for democracy in our society. And when our government is adopting programs as broad as this, which affect every last one of us, and doing it in secret and lying about it to keep it secret, we have frustrated the process of democracy. We also have a reason to be concerned about it because privacy matters. There's a reason that the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution protects our privacy, protects against general warrants, protects against unreasonable searches and seizures. And that's because the framers understood that privacy is essential to human liberty. It's essential to the intimacy that we need in order to develop as human beings. It's essential to political freedom, to know that you have the ability to talk and to associate without having the government watching over you at every point. Some people say, well, privacy is dead, get over it. But I don't think privacy is dead. People still close the doors to their houses. They still close the doors to their bedrooms. They still put passwords on their computers. We have not given up the ghost with respect to privacy. And I think that's because at the end of the day, who among us would want to live in a world without privacy? That is the world that George Orwell depicted. That is the world that Ray Bradbury predicted in Fahrenheit 451. That is the world that Steven Spielberg showed us in Minority Report. That is not the world that I think any of us want to live in. What a democracy needs, in my view, is transparency from the government and privacy for the citizenry. But it seems like we've turned that on its head, where the government is insisting on secrecy for its activities, but insisting on transparency from us. I think we also ought to be concerned because this is the government that has this information. Again, some people say, well, look, AT&T and Verizon, they already have this information, so what's the big deal about the government getting the information? Well, there are concerns, and Heidi will talk about, concerns about the extent of information that private corporations have about us. But I think there are distinct concerns when the government has access to that information. Because private companies, AT&T, they don't have the same kinds of incentives to go after dissidents as does the government. And they don't have the same power to go after dissidents as does the government. They can't lock you up. They can't start a criminal investigation. They can't start a tax investigation against you. The government can. And so there's a very big difference, I think, between the corporations having this information for limited business purposes. Sometimes they have to, for billing purposes and the like, and giving it over to the government, which has this power over us. I think we also ought to be concerned about this because, as Bernie suggested, and Congressman Welch suggested, technological developments have radically changed the calculus with respect to privacy in the modern era. In the old days, if the government wanted to know where you went, what books you were reading, what magazines and newspapers you were reading, what you were listening to, who you hung out with, they could find that out, but they'd have to either spend incredible resources following you around 24/7, or get a warrant based on probable cause to come in and search your home. And even then, there was a limit on what they could find. They couldn't find out, for example, what you were hoping or desiring or thinking about. But in the modern era, because everything we do leaves a digital trace, virtually everything we do. Everybody who's here with a cell phone, you have told somebody that you're here. Every time you purchase something with a credit card, every time you send an email, every time you click on a link on the web, you are telling somebody else, some internet service provider or cell phone provider or the bank or the credit card company, what you're thinking about. And the government now has the ability to get that information on its interpretation of the Patriot Act. It has the ability to get that information, called business records, on every one of us without showing that any one of us is engaged in any kind of wrongdoing. Their theory is, well, at some point it might be useful to search through all this data to find a terrorist, and therefore it's relevant to a terrorist investigation to get this data, these business records, on literally everybody. And they now have, because of technology, the capacity to do that. You know, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, before Al Gore invented the internet, this possibility didn't exist. They literally couldn't do it. It was the invention of the internet, thank you Al Gore, it was the development of computers and really, really powerful computers that make it possible to collect it, to amass it, and to analyze it. And what does that mean? It means that what the government used to only be able to do with probable cause that you're engaged in some wrongdoing, they can now do, at least if you buy their interpretation of the law, they can now do without a warrant, without probable cause, without any basis for believing that you're engaged in any kind of wrongdoing. And that's a radical transformation in the relationship of we, the people, to the government. Because computers make it possible to gather all this information, to analyze all this information, to assess it, and to mine it, it is all the more critical that we put in place laws that put checks on the government's ability to do that, because there are no technological, practical checks on the government doing it now. The checks have to come from us. They have to come from us insisting that, yes, we want to be able to use the internet. Yes, we want to be able to call our children. Yes, we want to be able to buy things with credit cards. And no, we don't want to give all that information to the government simply because we want to live in the modern world. But the only way that we're going to have that kind of protection is if, in fact, we insist upon it through the enactment of statutory protections that ensure that we can live in the modern world, have our privacy, and have our security as well. And it is possible to do. And I think one of the good news here, if there is any good news, is that there is bipartisan support for reform of the NSA. There are something like 30 bills now pending in Congress. There were 0 bills pending in Congress before Edward Snowden told us what was going on. Now suddenly there are 30 bills pending in Congress. President Obama made no speeches about this before Edward Snowden told us that was going on. Now he's appointed an expert panel, adopted a number of recommendations. There were no judicial decisions declaring that this was unconstitutional before Edward Snowden disclosed it. Now there's a court that has held that the program is unconstitutional, another that has held that it is, and so that will go up. But I think the real place where we're going to see reform is in Congress. And so it's critical, I think, that Congress act, and I think Senator Sanders' bill is a great bill, and the USA Freedom Act, which is co-sponsored in the Senate by Senator Leahy, and in the House by Representative Jim Sensenbrenner, a Republican, a very conservative Republican. He wrote Section 215 of the Patriot Act, the provision that the government is using to get all of our metadata, and he says he never in his wildest dreams would have imagined that the government would have interpreted this law to allow them to do this. And so they've introduced a bill that would end bulk collection, end dragnet collection. It would allow the government to get business records where they could show that they have some reason to believe that the records pertain to somebody who we suspect is engaged in terrorist activity. That makes sense. That's the kind of tailored law enforcement and intelligence gathering approach that we have used in this country for centuries, and that has served us well, and that is consistent with the constitutional values that the nation was founded upon. It's possible that the Supreme Court will reinterpret the Fourth Amendment, just as Congressman Welch said, went with the phone. They reinterpreted the Fourth Amendment to ensure that there was privacy in phone conversations. It's possible that the Supreme Court will eventually reinterpret Fourth Amendment doctrine to protect our privacy rights in the modern era. A number of justices on the court have suggested that it needs to be updated, essentially, including Justice Alito, Justice Scalia, Justice Sotomayor. So there is some understanding of this risk at the Supreme Court, but we can't wait for the Supreme Court. We have to support the efforts of those in Congress, and particularly the leaders here from Vermont, to put checks in place. At the end of the day, it seems to me, none of us can be against surveillance. Surveillance is an important part of ensuring the security that allows us to be free. But we can insist that that surveillance respect the principles of privacy and liberty that we're ultimately here to protect. And I think we can reach a fair, balanced approach to this issue if we have a public debate about it. And that's why I think these kinds of forums are so important. As long as it's adopted and implemented in secret behind closed doors, we won't reach a fair and balanced approach. And I think the fact that the NSA has been collecting data on every time I text my daughter about please come out because I've been in line for 15 minutes waiting for you to pick you up from school, suggests that things are very much out of balance. Thank you very much.